My name is Christian Mauri. Together with the always fantastic Robert Doves over there, we are the Fremantle Network.
Thank you, Christian. And I would like everyone to please thank Christian and Rob. It's often said that Fremantle is the jewel in Labor's crown, something perhaps emphasised by the fact that our sitting MP, Simone McGurk, was the only candidate in the 2021 Labor landslide who didn't end up in a two-party contest. She'd already knocked everyone else out before the final round of preferences. But equally, the claim of Freo's gem-like status is often followed by the grumble, and that's why they take us for granted, showing perhaps we haven't quite yet achieved a socialist utopia. In fact, looking back, the district of Fremantle had a far more polyamorous relationship with the political parties than you might expect. Who could forget our one-night stand with the Grimsdale Cars in 2009? Our first colonial parliamentarians were actually partyless, though they were branded the ministerials after Federation for those who supported our inaugural Premier, Sir John Forrest, and the oppositionists. The first recognised party to win the seat was Labor in 1904, although it was held for just one single term. That election was also notable for the appearance, or the first appearance on the ballot paper, of the Liberal Party of Western Australia, though it would take many mergers, splits and coalitions before it become recognisable as the Liberal Party of today. Along the way, Fremantle was fought over by nationalists, communists, Liberal and Country, and and Democratic Labor before the appearance of one Joseph Sleeman. So dominant was this Labor stalwart that he held the seat for an amazing 35 years, and no one even bothered to challenge him in either the 1930, 1934, 1943 or 1947 elections. That's a far cry from the 11 candidates, many independents, who put their hands up in 1990, when Labor's youthful Jim McGinty took on the Liberals' tennis ace, Arthur Marshall. So, what does it mean to be sitting in a very safe seat, or to be looking at it wistfully from the sidelines? To give us their thoughts, I'd like to introduce our speakers for tonight. And first we have, I was going to say, is she arrived yet? Did I see not yet? Martin Drum. Okay, our first speaker is not with the political party, but to give us an analysis of the seat of Fremantle, and we of course have Fremantle state and federal levels, is Notre Dame's Executive Dean of the Faculties of Arts, Science, Business and Law, Dr. Martin Drum. Introduce the Honourable Dr. Brad William Pettitt, the Greens MLC for the Upper House seat of South Metropolitan. And we will be joined by the Honourable Simone Frances McGurk, the Labor member for Fremantle, sitting on a nice 28.5% margin. She has sent her apologies and she will be a little bit late. So what we'll do is... I've just introduced you, and you're 28.5% margin. So what we'll do tonight, we'll start off with Dr. Drum, who is going to give us a little bit of an overview of the seat, where it's been, where it's going, and then we'll hand it over to Simone and Brad to have a little bit of a chat. Then we'll have a bit of a break. You get to top up your glasses, have a wee, all that sort of stuff. And we come back on the exciting bit where we hand over the microphone to you, some ideas, some questions for everyone. And after that, we all hang out and spend money in this fantastic local hotel who put us up every time. So we've got to say thank you for them for that. And lastly, I should acknowledge that the land we are sitting on, or that I'm standing on, belongs to the Wajak Noongar people. and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So having said that, thank you, Dr. Drum.
Thank you, Steve. In many ways, Steve's a tough act to follow, very eloquent. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation on whose land we are, we value their traditions, their knowledges and insights in the discussions that we have. We will be followed, of course, by our two speakers, not three but two, and 2 out of 3 had bad, Netbo's said, so that's good. With Brad Pettitt from the Greens and Simone McGurk from the Labor Party. I'm expecting that they'll be talking to some extent on the opportunities that their party has, why their party is relevant to Fremantle, etc. So my role here is in setting the scene really for our political parties in Fremantle, maybe adding a bit of context along the way, talking about how well they've fared, maybe even a little bit of crystal ball gazing perhaps, although that's very, very dangerous of late in politics. You can never know what's around the corner. I'd start by talking about the fact that we're not talking about one seat of Fremantle, that we have a federal and state seat of Fremantle. They're very, very different. The state seat of Fremantle is just a fraction of the size of the federal seat of Fremantle. We have 2 state MPs here tonight. And the fate of the political parties in the federal seat is a bit different to the fate of the political parties in the state seat. Of course, there's the city of Fremantle as well, which is a bit different again. Most of the state seat of Fremantle overlaps with the city of Fremantle, but there's a few differences. North Fremantle is in the city of Curtin, and there's a bit of East Fremantle, town of East Fremantle, in the state seat of Fremantle. I think I would treat local government somewhat different to this conversation because we don't have the formal presence of political parties at local government in Western Australia. Probably a good thing when you think about some of the issues they've had in New South Wales and elsewhere with political parties at local government level, but that I digress. The state and federal seats do have profound implications for the outcomes of those seats, and particularly the fate of the parties. I'll talk a little bit about Labor, Liberal and Greens and how they've fared, and point out those differences. Labor's held the federal seat of Fremantle since 1934. That's a long time in anyone's book. It was held briefly by a Liberal Party's predecessor, the United Australia Party, but that's a long, long time ago. Famously in 1975, it was the one sole seat that Labor retained in a Liberal landslide when Kim Beazley Sr. Won by a small margin. There were only 2 candidates at that stage, Labor and Liberal. We have a lot more these days, and the Greens have obviously been a significant entrant since the late 80s onwards. In fact, the late 80s have seen a profound difference in the fate of the major parties and the minor parties. Until that time, both the major parties regularly polled in the mid to high 40s, and there's little else. It was actually the Democrats that first broke that stranglehold in Fremantle, followed by the Greens, and now obviously they've made some picking inroads. Labor's strongest booths in both the federal and state seats in the southern areas just south of Fremantle. In the state seat of Fremantle, they've lost support around the hub, the inner urban area of Fremantle, but they retain support in South Fremantle, Hilton, and then especially further south in the federal seat. The size of the federal seat puts it out of reach in many ways for the Greens. They may have a different point of view, but I think it's extremely unlikely that they'll win the federal seat of Fremantle because they don't tend to poll as well in places like Atwell, in Coburn, in Hammond Park, and a range of other suburbs further south. They do poll quite well in and around the Fremantle city centre, where they've been polling in the mid-30s of late. So that's a pretty good result. It's just not translated across the whole of the federal electorate. The Liberals do the best in East Fremantle and in the federal seat, North Fremantle as well, where they've tended to outpoll, certainly outpoll the Greens, but got very close to the Labor vote. A lot of people a lot of psephologists, people who study elections, look at trends. in voting patterns to try and understand how the political parties perform. In this case, there were some steady trends in Fremantle all the way up to 2013. We saw a slightly declining Labor vote, a fairly steady Liberal vote, and an ever-increasing Greens vote. In the 2017 and 21 elections, that all got turned on its head. There were 2 Labor landslides, particularly 21, but even 2017 was very one-sided, and that reversed that entire trend. So it's very difficult for us to see in the face of the so-called McGowan era how those trends in Fremantle will continue. But certainly interrupted that gradual demographic change. I might come back to demographics very shortly, but that's the federal and state fortunes of Labor improved significantly in the 21 and 22 elections and reversed a trend that had existed to date. On demographics, undertook a project a little while ago where we mapped income against booths in the Fremantle electorate, and what that demonstrated is as the electorate gentrified and the income in booths, income level of people mapped against the booths that are local to them increased, the Liberal vote increased, the Labor vote went down, none of that surprised, but the Greens vote increased as well during gentrification of booths, particularly in the northern part of the Fremantle state and federal seats. Income level is an interesting factor when it comes to support for political parties. The other thing that the Greens have benefited from is increasing levels of tertiary education in seats. And again, in Fremantle, that has steadily risen since the 1980s. So there are a couple of prevailing factors that might help us understand where and how political parties are getting their votes. They're not the only ones. Unsurprisingly, you'll hear that when Liberals do well at the state election, they do better in Fremantle, and vice versa. When Labor does well overall, they do better in Fremantle. But we can see instances where Labor's fortunes, or fortunes of the Greens, differentiate from the fortunes of other seats. In 2017, we saw a much bigger swing to Labor and the Greens in Fremantle and surrounding areas than we did in the broader electorate. I think plenty of you in this room might have an answer for that, and that's because the railway issue was much stronger in 2017 than it was before or after. So we know local issues can have a major factor in and around Fremantle, and when we think about the fate of political parties, they'll continue to be relevant. So no one can afford to be complacent. Fremantle people are particularly cognizant of local issues and always have been. A couple of things that I might say in the future, it's very difficult to predict, but I would say the Liberals are unlikely to win the state and federal seats, but there are better chances in the federal seat than the state seat. In a Liberal landslide, there might be a chance. I don't think it's very likely, but in 2013, Fremantle was formally classified as a marginal seat because the margin got under 5% at the federal level. Don't think that's probably going to happen again in a hurry, but we'll see. Likewise, in the state seat, Steve mentioned the brief flirtation with the Greens. They got 44% in 2009, but there was a by-election and the Liberals weren't standing. Their best chance is probably in another by-election, but there is the planets could align, and if they get to the mid to high 20s and they get a very strong preference vote from the Liberals, it's possible, but I think it's also extremely unlikely. In fact, what we know from preference flows from Liberals is that they're flowing much smaller numbers to the Greens than they did previously. So that's a bit of context. It'll tell you a little bit more about how our electorates may fare in the future, and I think we'll then go and turn our attention to the political parties and what they've got to tell you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martin Trump. Now I'd like to introduce or invite up to the microphone the MLC, the Greens for the South Metropolitan, is the Honourable, sorry, his honour, the Honourable Brad Pettitt.
Thank you. The honourable bit, it was a bit weird and odd. Just as the worship bit, isn't it? We just these random titles that we get. But very nice to be here. Both Simone and I have run from Parliament, so there's a slight world, it's got a slightly weird world changing in your head from the inside of Parliament House to here, but lovely being here and also acknowledge you're on I don't know our land. I want to start with a question, because I'm going to pick up a bit where Steve was talking about taking for granted kind of analogy. What was the last bit of major infrastructure in Fremantle either state government invested? The last big investment, that wasn't a road, it was for roads. Well, that wasn't a road in Fremantle. No, roundabout's been counted. We want any clues? So my guess, and I'm happy to be correct, is the Fremantle Maritime Museum, which was initiated, interestingly, by the Court Liberal government in the late 1990s. And completed under the Gallop government in the early 2000s. So it's over 20 years ago. Was to the best of my knowledge, and have to be corrected, the last bit of major infrastructure development that's been supported by the state government, to the best of my knowledge. And we can have that debate. Now, of course, there has been the major King Square project, but that wasn't, whilst the Department of Communities moved in for that was entirely funded by the City of Fremantle, about 50 odd million, and Serona Capital about 220 million. And interestingly, the state government at the time put out a media statement. It was saying it was saving them $53 million by moving Department of Communities to Fremantle. So that one can't count. But what does, I guess the other examples are clearly roads. So we did get a $118 million investment in a very large roundabout, as someone pointed out. Whether you think that's a good investment or not, I'll leave that to you, but I have my views. It was certainly better than some of the things that the Liberal Party were proposing, which was the Giant Tunnel, but I still think, to be blunt about it, it's a pretty un-Fremantle kind of way of entering our city, and one that I certainly feel like was a bit underwhelming. Then, of course, there's the Fremantle Police Complex, which is under construction right now, which is a $100 million investment. Interestingly, the public consultation on that, I've been through a lot of public consultations in my time. It's the first one where there was a big number in the hundreds. I forget how much it was, 200, 240 or something? 225. Something like that, 225, of which there were 220 odd against and 0 for, which I've never seen in my life before. But of course it was still approved by the West Australian Planning Commission and it's progressing. So we do have so I wanted to be up front. There have been major investments, maybe just not the kinds that we wanted, maybe not the kinds that we would hope for as a community. I guess the other one is the Fremantle Traffic Bridge, which has been an interesting process. And I know there's a few of you in the room who have seen that, which we've seen a ordinary bridge on the east side of the old bridge, hard up against apartments, strong community campaign to move it, and then we had a weird highway on the foreshore solution, strong community campaign to get rid of it, and we have a new solution, which I think is certainly better aesthetically on the current alignment. But I think what was interesting through that process was only, to the best of my knowledge, it was only the community and some of the council who were saying this is not acceptable for Fremantle, we should have better. Simone might want to correct me, but I do not remember any of our state members getting up publicly and saying this project is a dog and needs to be changed. But well done to the community for actually making that happen. So, but I don't want to make just about infrastructure. That's actually not, I think, what Fred was just about. So another example is the arts. I think the arts is a really interesting one if we turn down one to that. So where are we at with that? So 2 examples come to mind. Spare Parts Puppet Theatre, everyone knows that, on Bridges Main Park. Currently they can't perform there because the state government venue is not fit for habitation, and they're currently having to perform at a Claremont Showgrounds, which I find bizarre and unacceptable. We also have a circus, which is operating has been for 6 years, operating on a council managed reserve outside Pioneer Park in a tent. because they were kicked out of their former place at the Customs House. Now, this is a wealthy state government who have been running multi-billion-dollar surpluses year on year. The idea that we can't find a home, a permanent home, for some of our key community assets, like a public school, like a circus, in our city, I think is outrageous. In fact, what makes me more mad is that we hear that there are attempts to get them to move to Midland, get them to move to the northern suburbs, out of the things that make us a community. And we should be mad about that, because frankly, they are part of our heart and soul. I know they want to stay, but they need a home, and they need the state government to get up there and support it. I know the council has been doing again and again advocating for that, but it's pretty important that we keep doing that.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be clear, I'm not blaming Simone at all for this, because she's in a really interesting position, and I want to give an example of what it is, because it's a safe seat problem. It's really hard for her to go to Cabinet and make a case for investment in Fremantle when actually in a transactional world, and one thing I've learned going from local government to state parliament is it's deeply transactional. You've got to have something to swap, otherwise there's no outcome. And in a transactional world, it's very hard for Simone to find something to transact because it's a safe seat. So what we see with Fremantle Oval is a really good example. Fremantle Oval for decades has been trying to get redeveloped. Great plans, another really good plan that the Freo Council put together recently. Still nothing from the state government. East Fremantle Oval, who has another local member, I think, Lisa, who's no more effective than Simone, managed to get $25 million like that out of the McGowan government because she's not in a safe seat. She's in one where the Liberal Party will contest it for East Fremantle Oval, which is a far less strategic asset. So that's just the problem which someone like, if we find ourselves in, when our local member is in the safe seat. It's not Simone's fault. She's a good person doing her very best. So it's not a personal attack. But I think we need to highlight these things. So, have we need to stop now? Keep going? Okay.
The next one goes up.
Okay, yeah, well, get rid of it. So I think what I would just simply say in wrapping up is Fremantle is an amazing place, but if it's going to realise its potential, a local government of 34,000 people can't do it alone. It actually needs the state government to back it in, but it's only going to do that if they don't take us for granted. And for them not to take us for granted, I guess there's a question. Is it maybe Fremantle be best served by not always putting the Labor Party first on your ballot and making actually them work harder for your vote? Because I think there is a really good reason to say that actually Freo is not realising its potential because it can't do it alone. Thank you.
I'm keeping that. Having a quick look at something.
I'll send it to you.
Well, any notion that we're going to sit here and listen to some banal statements has gone out the window. Thanks very much to... I'd now like to invite to the microphone the Honourable Simone McGurk.
Thanks very much, Steve. And apologies for being late. I was in the Parliament and I was actually doing a bill on vocational training, so I had to be there. Can I acknowledge that we're here in Wadilla and pay my very deep respects to the traditional owners, their elders past, present and emerging. And I do want to talk about Fremantle. I know we're here to talk about Fremantle, but I do want to also, and I've got a couple of timekeepers here, talk about some of my experience in government. And I want to start just by pulling Brad up on a few things. I mean, one was to say that government is essentially transactional. I've been a minister now for nearly 7 years, and I'm part of a government, and I've been in cabinet for all of that time. I know how government works, Brad. I do actually understand that, and it is challenging. There are big picture issues, and I'll talk about some of those in relation to my portfolios, but also in terms of some of the work that we've done since we've been in government. And one of the things that I'm proud of is campaigning to stop Row 8 and to make sure that we did not have a major freeway coming into our electorate, and only government, Labor being in government, was going to stop that freeway. There was no way. There were two alternatives there. One was a Liberal government that started to do the clearing, as we all knew, we were down there, and the other was to elect Labor in government. That actually stopped the Perth freight link coming in. And I think we all acknowledge what a flawed plan that was, what a disaster it would have been for the wetlands, but also for the community. So since we've been in, we've started to do the work around Westport. It is challenging, the idea about what we do with the port, what the alternatives are if we don't have that freeway coming in. But we have been doing that work. Similarly, when you look at the bridge and the challenges we've had with that bridge, no, you're right. I didn't talk about it publicly because I sat down with Rita Safiotti in particular and sat down with my state and federal colleagues in Lisa O'Malley and Josh Wilson and with the council, and we talked through those dilemmas. We talked through those issues. So that's what you do when you're a member of the government, is you actually meet with her staff and you listen to people. I met with people who are in this room who wanted the existing bridge to be retained, and I understand people feel passionately about that, but that bridge is not safe. The foundations of it are not safe, and so that's why we're not going to proceed with that. And as a result of the community campaigns, but also the advocacy that I did, that Lisa O'Malley did, that Josh Wilson did, and working with the council to understand the different options, we have now arrived at that solution. That did not happen in a vacuum. I've been living in Fremantle for about 28 years. This time I also lived here when I was young. And a lot of the work that I've done previously when I was a trade union official and now as the member for Fremantle is actually informed by, I think, shared values and probably shared across in the left. I'm a progressive member of Parliament. And I do want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Fremantle, but I also know that people in Fremantle care about social issues. And so I was Child Protection Minister and Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence for nearly 7 years. And I'm wearing orange in this badge because we're in the 16 Days in WA campaign, which was a campaign to stop domestic violence. And I was the first minister first person to hold the position of Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence, and we've put in a range of reforms, fundamental reforms in our state, way overdue investment in that regard, and I'm really proud of that work. I'm proud of the work we've done in child protection that I did as Minister, where for the first time in WA, kids who are in the foster care system who are in child protection are given support from the age of 18 to 21. That is life-changing for those young people. I argued for it in Cabinet. I got millions of dollars in funding, and importantly, we co-designed that system, and now young people are telling me that as a result of the way that we've put that system in place, it's really making a difference around the state. I changed the child protection legislation to make sure that Aboriginal organisations are fundamental in our child protection system. They actually have a right, and started the reforms so that now we are funding a lot more Aboriginal controlled organisations in our child protection system. Now, for many of us looking around this room, it probably won't affect our lives. Domestic violence might, but the child protection system may or may not affect your lives. But these are big system reforms that take attention to detail, that take a commitment to the values that are needed to change lives, and actually understanding how government works and doing the hard yards that I did over nearly 7 years. Similarly, for our homelessness policy, saw how the Housing First policy works, saw that played out in practice in a range of different examples here, particularly in Western Australia, and then did the work to change our system, our policy in government, and then start to change the sort of service provision, the work that we do in the Department of Communities to really fundamentally change the way that we address homelessness in our state. Help fund Bully Biddy Maya, which is the first homelessness service run by an Aboriginal controlled organisation in Wandjina. I did that as a result of understanding the difference of values, understanding, as I said, the values that we need to apply, but then actually being in government so that we can make those changes. These are not theoretical things. These are things that we can think we have to do better for First Nations people. Of course we did. Of course we do. And when we were campaigning for The Voice, I was out there too. Like, I'm very proud of the work that Labor did in campaigning for The Voice. It was a challenging campaign, but we were out there. Josh and myself, Lisa O'Malley, I know Hannah was there. We were out there knocking on doors, organising the phone banks, trying to make a difference. But particularly in my portfolios, I was very proud of some of that work that we did. And I think Fremantle people care about that stuff. They care about it in real ways. They don't just, it's not just a theoretical thing over there. These are real differences that are made, that I'm proud of the things that I've done as a minister. Now I'm the Minister for Water, Vocational Training and Youth, and record investment in vocational training. And again, record investment sounds like one of those politician statements, I know that, but I see the difference that vocational training makes to people's lives. And we are we're making huge investments, free courses, discounted courses, heavily discounted courses, nearly $250 million, seeing TAFE colleges absolutely transformed. It's really, really exciting. And this is the investment that makes a difference to low-income people's lives. Not just talking about it. Okay. I missed the code. Sorry. Yeah. So these are things that make a difference, and I'm very proud to be the vocational training minister under this government, to be working with the federal government. There's more to do, and if we talk about the transition to clean energy, the skills component is absolutely central to that, absolutely central. Making sure we've got, and a lot of that is in the vocational training area, to making sure we've got the right amount of tradespeople. Sometimes it'll mean new qualifications, but usually it'll be post-trade. And today I was out at TAFE because Horizon Power has just given a standalone power system to the North Metro TAFE, where they're having a look at it. They're going to be able, some of it's portable, they'll be able to take it up to regions, train local people to work on these standalone power systems. I'm also the Minister for Water. What that means in practice is that I was able to influence the decision about what we do with the Fitzroy River. I have seen so many stickers around Fremantle about protect Matawarra, protect the Fitzroy River. We made the decision, Labor made the decision, I made the decision with my colleagues, working constructively with them to negotiate through the issues. To that extent, perhaps transactional, Brad, I call it working together. I call it working with my colleagues, the Minister for Agriculture, the Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, to understand what are the options and what are our choices around the water allocations in Fitzroy River. And then about a week after we made that announcement, I fronted a meeting of all the traditional owners in Fitzroy, all the traditional owners, the senior elders along the Matawarra, and had a meeting with them where they, there are still issues, but they essentially said, we can live with this decision. We think this is a sound decision, which is not to take surface water and to have limited amounts of groundwater, and importantly to involve them in the decisions. Because we're in government, we can start to do that work. It's not just a headline, it's not just a campaign, it's actually making change. And that's the other example I want to give in water is that when the Liberals were in power, Barnett was the Premier. I think Tony Abbott was Premier, but was Prime Minister, and they took the funding that the federal government gave to remote communities. So the federal government used to help fund the services of remote communities. The Feds said, we're just wiping it out. And Barnett said, I don't know how many of you remember this or realised it at the time, well, we'll just close those remote communities. It was easy, because he's down here, so we'll close them. It was just craziness. No planning about how people would move into cities, what that meant, let alone their connection to that country. And another shocking example, it was a really appalling decision, and one that we quickly reversed when we came into government. Because we're in government, because we are in a position to win government, we made that decision, and I think allocated first up just under 300 million, 280 million or something, to start to fund better services to remote communities. Part of those services is about good quality water services, because previously the Department of Communities through housing did that. Water Corporation is now doing that. I'm the Minister for Water. So we're going to roll out over the next 10 years better water services. We now have just outside Derby the first Aboriginal community with a licensed wastewater system. And you know, these are practical things where we are going to have good quality water systems to those remote communities, and those Aboriginal people will be involved in those plans. I think Fremantle people care about those things. Yes, I'm happy to talk about Fremantle during the questions. Of course, there's a lot going on and a lot of need in Fremantle. I see that and I advocate for it. I absolutely advocate for it. We did need a new police station. That is the reality. We can't shy away from that. We also needed a new bridge, and I advocated to get the design right. And I will continue to advocate, as I have been doing, about whether it's spare parts or whether it's Circus, Joe Smith and co at Circus WA, whether it's the designs around the future of Freo and Victoria Quay. I mean, you understand that, Brad, that when you were in local government, we negotiate, you know, we work together. I didn't feel like our relationship was transactional. We were working together to say, at times we have a joint objective, let's try and see how we can work to achieve that. And I'll be judged by people at the next election. I don't take Fremantle for granted. It was clearly not a safe seat because I took it from an independent in 2013, so it's not a safe seat. And people might have seen a few weeks ago that the West reported, I think only a week ago, that I was amongst one of the MPs that spent the largest amount in my electorate on communicating with local members. I think it was the second or third highest. So I don't take this seat for granted. I work hard to listen to people, to respond, but sometimes we disagree. That's the nature of representative politics. And I hope people understand my genuine passion, but also capacity, but also my commitment to not just talk about this stuff, but to be in government and make change. Be in government and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simone. Now you get to have a little break, go out and top up your glasses, and perhaps see you back here in about 5-10 minutes and we'll crank it up again. Free to whip in a quick opinion or a question. And Christian, and questions to our panelists.
So we already have 2 people lined up. What is that?
Hi Martin, thanks for your wrap up of what might happen. I've got another barometer that I wonder if the audience here would like to consider. My barometer is the amount of outrage in Fremantle and the groups that have been formed to lobby special interests. You probably know SOS, which is Saving Our Shores, who, when the government announced that they were going to blast a tank highway down a foreshore, like, just how illogical is that? And it took a bunch of people, like thousands, to come and say that's crazy. I also represent the safety of Fremantle Bridge, and we have almost 10,000 people that have signed a petition against the government's plan, against its own legislation to demolish the heritage listed bridge. It has the highest heritage listing of the state government of any asset. So there's 10,000 people lobbying the state government. We've also got North Fremantle Residents Association up in arms in Fremantle about the huge, enormous Goliath apartments that are planned for. So there's 3 organisations representing tens of thousands of people. This is a barometer of the community's views of the Labor Party and what they're doing. Now, when Simone said that she speaks to members of the community to get their feedback, I actually disagree with that. I'm representative of 10,000 people, 6,000 that come from your constituency that say no to knocking down the bridge. I tried to get a meeting with Simone. We all tried, about 100 of us. Hundreds of us tried to get a meeting with the Minister for Heritage. We were put onto Safiotti because perhaps that actually, if a bridge is going to be like destroyed, it suddenly is not under the care of the Heritage Minister, it goes to the Planning Minister. Weird that that's what happened. No minister, no one was prepared to talk to us.
Just 1 second here.
Yes.
I've read Isidora's report,
Okay.
and it's incredibly comprehensive, but it's quite long.
Keep it
Okay, so, but look, this is not just about the bridge, but this is, Simone might remember me, because she didn't accept any meetings, even Carmen Lawrence, her former Premier, who's actually one of the founding members of the Save Fremantle Bridge Alliance, no meetings with Simone. So, look, Simone said that she talks to her community, and she mentioned some people, Hannah Fitzhardy, Labor Party. She talked to also Josh Wilson, Labor Party. She's talking to people from her own party, but not her community. This is what I think, and there's only one barometer. It's the amount of people that have formed groups to lobby. I'm a mother of 4. I'm a business owner. I'm too busy to actually spend my time lobbying, but that's what I need to do. So that's just a thought. But Simone, you might remember me when I didn't set any meetings, so I fronted up with my sister, who lives in Whiteland Valley, my mother, who lives in Fremantle, and I live in North Freo. And we had a petition there of 3,500 people that wanted to save the bridge. You didn't shake my hand. I said, here's the petition. You didn't want it. I said, what would change your mind on keeping the bridge? You said, nothing. Now we've got 10,000 people. I wonder if you'd accept my petition.
Thank you very much.
I do meet people anyone who wants to come and meet me in my electorate office, I will meet with them, not just people who are members of the Labor Party. One of the reasons I didn't agree to meet with you in my electorate office is because you're not in my electorate. You're in North Fremantle, which means your local member is David Honey. And I actually did meet a number of people who talked to me about their issues about the bridge. If they were in my electorate, I met with them. It is challenging to meet. I just do not have time in Fremantle to meet with people outside my electorate on Fremantle matters. I cannot manage that. It's true, I do have limited capacity. And I remember the day that you came to see me, just outside the town hall. I don't remember not shaking your hand. We spoke, and I spoke to your mum, and I understand your point of view. But that is the reason I didn't meet with you, is because you're not in my electorate. And I do need to make a decision about who I have time to meet with when I'm in my electorate and not in the ministerial office. So I met with a number of people, and so we're clear. The alignment did change because people raised issues about whether it should be on the east side, particularly because it was too close to the residents there on the north side, the apartments there. The position was changed to the west of the current bridge, and despite what people are saying about the change in the road alignment, a number of people thought that it had merit, and I think there were pros and cons. I actually did think that some of that had merit, because eventually we'll want a clearer way of getting into Victoria Quay. There were quite a few quite complex design issues relating to that bridge. So that's the issue about the alignment. And I think people were concerned about those changes. I think they were also concerned about the aesthetics of the bridge and sort of knock-on effects. So I met a number of times, as did others, as I said, the other state members, etc., to talk to Rita Saviotti's office, to talk to the project managers and other lead people about how some of those things could be overcome. In regard to keeping the current bridge, you asked me if I was going to change my position, and I'm not convinced that that is the best thing for Fremantle. It would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to maintain that bridge. And one of the challenges with the bridge is navigating it underneath. So there's so many pylons underneath now that navigating the bridge along the river has been a challenge. Anyway, so when you said would I change my mind on keeping the bridge, I'm not convinced of that. On the alignment, I had views, but I listened to those views and then tried to sort of understand. And sometimes I agree with people, sometimes I don't.
Thank you, Simone. So following suit, I'm reminding everybody, time is a pie, and if you take too much time, you're taking pie out of somebody else's mouth.
This is a question to Labor and the Greens. I guess my question's is particularly about Labor and the Liberal Party. It's about disasters. And particularly in Western Australia, mining companies pay critical taxes and get massive subsidies that are the largest contributor, one of the largest contributors to global warming in Western Australia and around the world. Yet these disasters that are due to, in large part by climate change and the heating of the atmosphere from these fossil fuel companies, will increase insurance premiums for homeowners in Western Australia, where a lot of homeowners will no longer be able to get insurance for their properties. And my question is, what will you do when bushfires in bushfire-prone areas in Perry and Fringe, and as we saw in Hammond Park and Maroona this last week in springtime, or maybe Indigenous season it is, Gambarang. So, and it's not even summer yet. So these heat waves and bushfires will significantly increase. I'm a local bushfire brigade volunteer. I also study a Master's in Disasters and Design and Development at RMIT. And I work with local councils to mitigate disasters around their key infrastructure here in Perth. And for example, in Wanneroo, local councils don't have enough funding to manage the land that they have. The City of Wanneroo has a budget of $100,000 for $1 million maintenance job on their land, which affects properties. So the land company managed by local councils, whose responsibility it is to manage disaster response through defects and emergency services, and the funding through the NDRR, National Disaster Risk Reduction, and the DRF funding, Disaster Ready Fund, and the MAP funding, which local emergency services have to apply for, has been doubled between 2015 and 2017, and an inquiry is occurring for increasing funding for disasters.
Can you whip through to the question, please?
So my question is, these disasters and the funding to mitigate them is not adequate, and at the same time we're subsidising fossil fuel companies to increase the risk of disasters of bushfires and heat waves and coastal inundation and cyclones.
Question.
So my question is, how can we rely on a Labor government that has models for these increasing temperatures and disasters, and what are they going to do about this situation that we're faced with today, and keeping in mind the insurance risks, people's properties that can all get gutted?
I think we get the gist of it.
All points well made, and that is climate change is real. It's having a real impact on every aspect of our lives, and it's an absolute challenge for us as a country. I understand that. It's a challenge for our country, and it's a challenge for the world. Labor has been left to pick up the legacy, particularly of the coalition government federally, which got to office on a climate scepticism and opposing a price on carbon. So Labor had implemented a price on carbon under when Julia Gillard was Prime Minister, but that was dismantled under the coalition through what I think we'd all agree was a disastrous but effective political campaign from the Conservatives' point of view. So we have lost a lot of time in regard to addressing climate change in Australia. And Western Australia is in a particularly challenging place because we are a resource-dependent economy. I mean, you talked about mining, it's probably LNG that is the bigger issue because it's very energy intensive to, it's not only the gas that we produce, it's the process of liquefying it to export it, but it's very energy intensive, and that's a real challenge for our economy. It'll be interesting to see how many people, in wider Fremantle actually have jobs that are related to the resources sector. So how we transition out of that as a country and as a state is very, very difficult. I talked about my responsibility in training and making sure that we've got the workforce ready to start to move into renewables. We've made a decision as a state government to move out of coal-fired power for state-generated electricity, so that'll happen by 2030, and we're involved in making sure that there's a just transition for those people in Collie. This is not just a theoretical thing someone else, these are lives in Collie, and we're working very hard, and in fact it's been a model that's been picked up nationally. And doing a range of other things in regard to reducing our emissions as a state government, but you're right about the resources sector, that's a challenge for us. Okay, so I'll just get sorry, Christian,
we're buzzers.
I agree that the emergency services response to this needs to be a lot more sophisticated than it's been to date. I think we are actually doing that. I mean, I'm happy to get you some more information or to meet with you separately, and it's not an area that I don't have figures to hand, but I know we're working very hard, and I saw a response up in Wanneroo, and it was, while houses were lost, lives were. So happy to get you some more information and get the conversation going.
So we've got one, and then we've got two.
Just one moment, because he did address it to both parties.
Yeah.
Yes, good man.
Great question. Key, I think key headline is probably, and I know there's a risk report out there that the government hasn't made public, but that suggests it's actually worse than we ever seen, and it's going to get a lot worse quickly. Frankly, I think it's worth a couple of things commenting what how Simone just wondered. It's not about the resources sector, that's the problem, it's gas. Let's just be clear about it. It's that we need to separate out gas from mining and different things. And the gas sector doesn't yield that many jobs and doesn't yield that much revenue. But we have, unfortunately, a state government approach which is all about expanding it. And expanding it rapidly, that is going to see WA's emissions go up this decade. We are already the only state that where emissions have risen since the baseline year 2005. We're the only state without a 2030 target, and the government is about to bring in new legislation this week. Make us the only state with a target is 2035. Nothing, and not even a plan, we put together until after the next election for how emissions might go down between 2030 and 2035. That's because the government frankly knows they've got nothing, and emissions are going to go up this decade. And this is the critical decade. Anyone, as you know, as far as climate science is, they're going to go down. So I just want to be clear that we are fueling this climate crisis, is the Green position. We've got to basically keep fossil fuels in the ground. We've got to transition quickly, and gas is not part of the transition. That is industry spin.
Yeah.
Just before I hand it over to the next speaker, I'm going to add something in here about gas, hopefully very quickly. I was interviewing Peter Dowding, who once was the mining minister for West Australia, and he told me that he got this document to sign, and he looked at it, and it was the oil and gas deal. But the gas was free. We gave it away to the companies because back then they thought it was worth nothing. It's extraordinary. We gave our gas away as a sign. It's just that other stuff you have in the petrol. Anyway, we have another speaker here.
Thank you. My name is Felicity, and on the back of the question earlier and also Brad's answer, my question is around gas, specifically the expansion, the Northwest Shelf expansion. It's great to hear, Simone, that you are doing work in training and that there's going to be people that are trained to that transition to renewable energy. But I just can't see how, and I actually got one of your communications, I brought it along with me. It states net zero by 2050, but there's no way we can achieve net zero by 2050 if the expansion goes ahead. It's also great that Collie Coal is being shut down, but the emissions from the expansion, so the Browse and also the Pluto expansion, is going to be 100 times the emissions that we were seeing from Collie Coal. So I guess what I want to know, I have a direct ask, and that is if you could ask the Environment Minister, Reece Whitby, to reject the approval submission when it comes across his desk. And if your answer to that is no, you won't do that, I'd love to hear how the government is planning on achieving net zero by 2050 while also seeing gas production continuing through until 2070. And I have heard the line that we need gas for a transition, but this is gas for export, so it doesn't actually help us transition to renewable energy. We have enough gas already to see us through to a transition. And in terms of jobs and how many people are employed by the gas industry in your electorate, 0.6%
minimal
employment in the gas industry across WA. So whether that translates to 0.6% in Fremantle, probably reasonably likely, I would say. I don't think there's a huge percentage of people that work in the gas industry in Fremantle.
There was a question.
You go. Yeah.
Yeah, look, thanks Felicity. I agree this is one of the more challenging areas of dealing with climate change. It would have been a lot better if we had a price on emissions. Federally, as I said, Labor put that in place under Julia Gillard. I have to say previously, it was the Greens who voted with the Liberals not to have a price on carbon under the federal government. So it's very, very frustrating because we have not had that system in Australia. We have had this very imperfect situation where you're actually asking a state government to make decisions that really need to be made nationally about how to transition industries that are high emitters. And I don't disagree with what Brad's saying about the mining industry and gas and etc. We've got a lot more data now about what's happening across different sectors. And there's no doubt that we are, time is against us and we are having to work at a much faster pace because we've left it so long. As a country and the Conservatives have got a lot to answer for, but it would have been good if we had an emissions trading, an emission price on carbon back then. In relation to the gas, one of the issues too is what's going to happen with our trading partners. So how does China get out of coal and how does Indonesia get out of coal? If we are not producing gas here, there are questions about whether they will just keep...
It's on the Woodside website, ironically. On the Woodside website, my CSIRO says still commercial confidence on it, and literally that's what it says. So when we export gas and we expand exports of gas, the CSIRO's own modelling says we are delaying the transition to renewables in Asia.
We're going to Richard next.
I'm going to...
Martin.
Yes. Dr. Drum is a very wise man and has sat there quietly the whole time waiting for someone who had the beautiful question for him. Somebody got a question perfect for...
In every election these days, we hear of one or other party getting its lowest ever primary vote, at least in some seats, and that seems to be a long-term trend. My question is, how long can this go on, this reduction in the two major parties' primary vote, before some form of coalition of the other minor entities becomes an existential threat to them and to the two-party system? And second question, would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
Okay, good question. The simple answer is that the trend away from the two main parties, Labor and Liberal, is about a 30-year-old trend. It's been increasing, and now more than a quarter of voters don't vote Labor or Liberal in the House of Representatives, and more than a third don't vote Labor or Liberal in the Senate. So that's a pretty big chunk of voters. So when someone says to you, why are we electing minor party people in the Senate? Well, that's because people are voting for them. Actually, big deal. So we've got at state level, we're going to have one electorate for the entire state, and I declare I had an interest in that. I was part of the committee that advised government to go down that path. I think we had a horrible situation in malapportionment in Western Australia. It was ridiculous. Brad's electorate has over 400,000 voters, so it's not really a regional electorate anyway. It's meaningless. Now we've got one state electorate, and the quota will be just 2.6%. So you can bet you're going to get a lot of other people elected at the next state election in 2025. That wouldn't be a bad thing. It's not because I dislike major parties, but I think pluralism is a healthy thing in a democracy. And we will get pluralism in the state upper house after the next election. It'll be much harder for any party to have a majority in their own right. So they will have to listen to a lot of other parties. And overall, it doesn't matter if it's a Liberal, Labor, Greens government, that's a good thing, I believe. You asked about the Teals. The Teals aren't an accident. The Teals happened because the Liberals weren't listening to the inner city voters, and they kept on selecting candidates that didn't fit their electorate. And sooner or later, that started to cost them. And once you get minor parties and independents that win about 25 to 30% of the vote, under a preferential system, they've got a shot. And that happened in multiple electorates this time at the federal election. And it just means that people can't be complacent anymore. It means there's a lot less safe seats, and that's a good thing as well. I don't quite believe that just safe seats, no one gets anything. I think you've still got hard-working members that can deliver things in safe seats. But I think that political competition is a healthy thing, and we're starting to get more of it. It's because voters are looking for different alternatives.
After that, we have time for one more person. So if you have something burning to say, what's important to how you're doing it precisely, please.
Hi everybody, Richard Evans from the Old Fremantle Bridge Alliance. Just got a quick question. There's a few things I could refute that Simone said earlier that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars of maintenance. I've actually got we have a letter from the head of Main Roads that said currently it's only $400,000 a year maintenance, and that's with and Brad's seen the letter, with 40-ton trucks going over it, and some other things that you mentioned, and that was after $25 million was spent fixing it up. And we met with Sean Williamson, who was one of the engineers who worked on that, and said it was designed to last 25 to 30 years, and that was 5 years ago. And it wasn't until Row 8 was cancelled, they were actually stopped to kind of keep maintaining it, because the plan was to keep the old bridge. They didn't plan on paying off a UK construction company because they weren't doing Row 8 anymore. But my main question that's kind of come out of this, and it was wonderful this time last year, we had the politics in the pub about the bridge and the Canning Highway alignment. We had about 150 people in here. It was quite an amazing night. And Gina and Lisa and Ian and Margaret did a wonderful job. We all did a wonderful job pushing back against the council to make Main Roads go back to the drawing board, and it took them a year, and now we've got a Photoshop image of a bridge, which we have no costings for. That bridge, I've heard estimated will be $500 to $600 million to build that, so I don't know. Anyway, my quick question is, with that, where is the traffic going to go? Because yourself and Hannah were both in the community consultation we had on the Saturday morning, and they said categorically, we have to leave the old bridge up. I will do this because the Stirling Bridge can't take the traffic. And I've met with a number of people, Steve and Brad and myself, and people around the community just going, it doesn't make sense, it's going to be a nightmare. Where are those 23,000 cars a day going to go? Because there's no explanation for Main Road.
Yeah, so this question of trying to keep the existing bridge open for as long as possible was one of the issues, was one of the constraints when they were deciding, how they would work, and initially why they went east, that is downriver, and then went west, because they wanted to keep the existing bridge open as long as possible. You'll see from a video, I think it's on my Facebook page, other people's as well, the construction. One of the reasons they decided the design that they did was that you can see that they basically keep the current bridge going for as long as possible, and they build the two sides of the bridge on either side, and then they close it. I think they're saying for probably a year they'll still have to close it, which will be really challenging. I mean, it was going to have to close for some time no matter what they did, particularly because of the endpoints. I'm not an engineer, this is just what I was saying, but yeah, it is going to be challenging, and they're working through those options at the moment in terms of, it'll be about a year that it'll close, that will be an issue. But you can see on that little video that they keep two lanes, one going either end for quite a while they do the construction, and then when they go into the middle parts, they close the bridge. I think they've still got an issue about cyclists and pedestrians and how they're going to manage them. I mean, as you'll see with the Armidale train line, you know, the challenge of building new infrastructure is that it's got interruptions. That sometimes it has been one of the constraints of the project.
It's a good question, and I mean, I've been around this project long enough to have heard Main Road say to me on many occasions, we can't entertain that because it doesn't work, it just creates gridlock. So I'll be fascinated. I mean, and I think this is where we need to look transparency. This project has had a real lack. So what we've had is idea about public, and then some by community engagement, telling people what we think. No proper back and forth. Disappearing for a year. Next idea. What we actually need now is actually a proper approach with that proper modelling that shows how it's going to work. Because what we're saying to the Fremantle CBD business owners, especially, which I'm worried about, is now you have one lane. That's High Street, one lane to get into Fremantle. Anyone from the northern suburbs and east. And that really worries me. That's why when the council at the time was actually real, and the Chamber of Commerce at the time were like, under no circumstances can you have no old traffic bridge. So I think it's a real issue, and I think Main Roads, and one of the things would be great to see that the Minister in soft demand of them is that they release that modelling around how that traffic works in a transparent way. Because frankly, the last bit of modelling around the highway on the foreshore was such a debacle that Main Roads, when I confronted them about it, said, oh no, our own numbers are wrong around modelling. The numbers that we've got on our website, they're not right. Like, which numbers are you using then? Oh, we're not. We're just making it up. I mean, literally, that's what that means. And the idea then that same Main Roads, the same people doing that are going to do that again without actually this is real businesses, real commuters that we need to look after in this process. I like the new bridge. I hope it works. I hope it can be done. Let's don't actually just let Main Roads fluff their way through it without proper, transparent way of actually showing different businesses and community around this works.
Okay, hello. I have a question for Simone and Brad, which concerns the arts in Fremantle, and in particular live music, because it really has been suffering. Venues have been rapidly disappearing, and there's diminishing opportunities for local musicians to work and perform, particularly in original music. It's not probably unique to Fremantle, but it is definitely affecting us here. And it's an important cultural export and part of our life, part of what's made me very proud to be living in Fremantle most of my life. And it seems to me the issues go beyond the venues. It's something I think we need interventions at this point. I'd like to hear ideas tabled for what we can do about it, what can local and state government do to help. Yeah, that's the question.
Really good question, and one which I've actually recently held a roundtable. One of the, and I know I said everything, State Department is largely transactional, which I stand by, and I was actually informed that by one of Simone's colleagues when I was giving her good ideas, and she told me to stop because I had nothing to offer. That would be transacted. But not all of it is. And one part of the thing called Parliamentary Friends of, and one of the groups I started off with the Parliamentary Friends of the Arts, which has a lot, and we recently had a live music roundtable with my ALP colleague Darren West, and to look at this exact issue, because what we are hearing is that costs of touring have gone through the roof. It's basically made, so there's been lots of stories, quick bit of background of artists getting offered a tour, played a festival on the East Coast or in the US or something, they can, if they do it, they'll lose $20,000. It's because the cost of hotels and touring and those kinds of things is so much more. So, in fact, we've just written recently to the Minister saying we need a specific funding round to support emerging and mid-career artists to actually get out to promote what's happening. Because without that, it's not going to happen. And I think we are seeing venues coming back, which is great. And I love that Freo has so many live music venues. But I think actually helping artists tour and getting the stuff out there, especially because you're not going to make money out of CDs anymore, and touring's at the heart of it. So that's one thing that we are doing, and pushing the minister to see if we can have some more discrete funding rounds just for those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about being a local member is you get these questions and you think, okay, and I was at the event that Brad held, and it was good to have people at Parliament House in the courtyard, and there was a range of different, people in largely performing arts.
That's 2 weeks.
Okay, so that was the Friends of Arts for the Arts Chamber of Commerce. But I agree about the challenges of live music. I grew up with that as a young person, and perhaps my lifestyle in a manner doesn't let me get out as much as I would like to now. But I know how important that is. I know how important it is for the musicians and also for the public to see live music. So I'm trying. Look, we have got some policies in relation to that about how we continue to support different parts of the arts. I think I think it's a real challenge for us in Western Australia when we kind of joke that we're kind of like a Galapagos in a way. We're kind of a little bit isolated, and it's meant that we've got some really great and unusual things that happen in our state, but they do need to be supported. And I'd be really keen to talk to you afterwards about how, with emergency services, what our policies are now and what we can do over the next couple of years in terms of specific supports. I did go over and meet with RTR not that long ago. They sort of wrote to me, I'm the sponsor. So I went over and met with them, and their big message was about live music, saying pretty well what Brad was saying. There were just so many challenges. If we don't support and make sure we pay some particular attention, a lot of this talent will wither on the vine. So I want to keep working with RTR and other organisations, other MPs across the chamber to see what we can do.
And I'll take some personal responsibility for the Dry Australian Performing Arts in Fremantle. My band, Mango Marmalade, convinced many a bar or music venue owner in Fremantle to perhaps not try that again.
Jan's band is called Visark, and they're phenomenal. He's an accomplished musician and even better bass player.
I'm a visiting Green voter from the UK, so first of all, I'm so lucky to have proportional representation here to get Green influences. It's a bit of an uphill struggle in the UK.
We don't have that.
Well, we've got one Green MP in our entire Parliament, and yet we have plenty of councillors, Green local councillors, that's really good. But how come we, as a cloudy, cold country, manage to regularly produce half our energy from renewables on a daily basis? We have some days where it's virtually all produced from renewables. So the government obviously supports offshore wind farms particularly. I've never even seen a wind turbine here. We have far more solar on rooftops, but also we have a lot of community projects where you have community solar farms, you have community groups which will put solar panels onto community buildings and schools. And I just wondered, is there any provision for community renewable energy projects in Western Australia?
Oh, great question. Yeah, sorry, sorry, Mr. Christian Mauri was just asking a very question about the Fremantle Community Wind Farm, which was one actually that was proposed by the community about a decade ago, probably starting, around actually on Fremantle Port. As a big fan of the port and someone who'd love it to stay, I think it's a great idea actually putting a wind farm on the port, which I think would actually be pretty amazing. But so there are those, so certainly that was a long project, long community-driven project for a long time. And even the council more recently talked about a community solar farm down here down on the 50,000 Merrill tip site. Now, both of those only work if you can actually have a sovereign purchase your power. So it's a water power purchasing agreement. In WA, we have a monopoly where the state-owned providers need to do that now, which was what ultimately killed off the Fremantle solar farm, was because getting someone to purchase the power. But there are huge opportunities in this space, especially now. Look, we don't have a renewable energy target in the state. We're one of the only states that doesn't. But if we did, then all of a sudden you would see those power purchase agreements happen very quickly. And now that coal is closing, we're going to have to actually ramp up our production of renewable energy, whether we like it or not. And that's a good thing, otherwise we're going to have to replace our coal with gas, and no one wants to see that. And so there's a real opportunity there for both large scale and community. All that said, because we are the world leaders in putting rooftop solar. We're putting almost a megawatt a day of solar on West Australian rooftops. So people, households are doing great stuff. The bits in between could do with a bit more of a kick up the butt.
I probably won't exactly answer the question, so full disclosure about that. But I was in the UK and met with your Conservative Minister for net zero and transport and talked about some of the skill issues actually a couple of months ago. There's no doubt that the UK is ahead of us in many respects, including renewables. I'm talking about me being responsible for water. So the Water Corp has got a target. It's the biggest user of energy in the southwest system apart from households. So the biggest industrial user because of pumps and because of desal. We're just about to build a new desal plant in Alkimos, and that will be net zero. And the Water Corporation has committed to be net zero by 2035. So the work that I'm doing as a minister is actually implementing that. And it is, it's not surprisingly, it's quite complex. We have just bought a wind farm. Water Corp has bought the rights to a wind farm down in Kojonup, Flat Rocks, and so we're working through that. One of the challenges for our southwest system, so I'm not really answering your question, but some of the issues that we're dealing with as a government in terms of renewables, because we are really keen to get as much as we can domestically, because we've got these challenges with the resources sector, is the transition from, in our southwest system, from the kind of base load issue. So that is sort of pretty well known now that, even if we start to work on batteries, and we're starting to invest a lot more in batteries, that you need to be able to, Brad would have a lot more expertise on this than I would, but you need to be able to stabilise the system and make sure you can transition out. So while we've said we're getting out of coal by 2030, and want to move much more to renewables, it's sort of making sure that our system is geared, and transmission is another huge challenge. So we've just reached an agreement with the federal government, I think for about $3 billion, which will be partly in the southwest system, but also in the northwest system around the Pilbara, and trying to work with those companies to start to share infrastructure, which they haven't done before. So a lot of that work's been done here, but I couldn't answer the question about community investments, but wind certainly, solar and hydrogen as well.
I'm going to pick up on a point Brad made. It's not really relevant to your question, but it's... and everyone's been talking about local issues, but probably the biggest local issue on the horizon is the future of our port site. And Brad touched on that really briefly, but if you want to work out how many people are going to live in Fremantle, if you want to work out how much green space we'll have in our city in the future, if you want to work out how much economic infrastructure, how much social infrastructure, how much transport infrastructure we'll have in and around Fremantle, think about that site. It's out to consultation at the moment. And where our political parties line up with the solutions to that site will be a really important issue going forward. You can bet it on.
Okay, last question, Lisa.
Thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. I just want to thank Simone and Brad for your very strong advocacy for our community. And Simone, I've got a couple more things that we can add to your list of things that you help the community with. And one of them is the 40k push that we had in South Fremantle. And also the traffic lights down South Beach. And I think without your advocacy to main roads, that sort of wouldn't have happened. Also, Gina will attest that, and Ian will attest that your support of finding a solution for the cat bus was also really important for our community. And also, thank you for helping us get a reasonable bridge outcome. I think it's really important. And Brad, also, you know, you've been very helpful, and thank you very much for everything that you've done. Isadora mentioned the community outrage and the number of groups that have popped up, and there have been many of us put in so many hours and days and weeks to oppose government decisions that are decide and ours defend, and probably really not best for the community. And pretty much there's been a bit of a kind of silence. So the outcomes, for example, around the last bridge were very much put on the table, and the community didn't really have an opportunity to say what we thought. It was pretty much, well, this is the decision, and like, you like it or lump it. There is no discussion. That's really, really bad. That's really bad change management. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. Just like, we can do a lot better, and I'm just wondering what level of engagement do you expect the local community will have going forward on the bridge and other such important projects like the police station, the port, etc. Because when these kind of really bad decisions are made, like, the community is driven to outrage, and we literally do, like, we have another full-time job doing this campaigning. Also, just one other thing that I was going to, I just can't remember because I'm so tired. But anyway, that was my question.
Yeah, about the level of involvement and consultation, yeah. Look, I think, I think that's a point well made, and I remember Ian and Margaret coming to see me down at the beach and saying, what's happening with the bridge? You know, we're going to have consultation with you. I think it was like the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 2022 was the last we've heard of what's happening, and I can understand people's frustration about that. And I was trying to talk to people out in the community and understand those concerns, and then relay them back to both the Minister's office and also the project leads when we got access. I don't have direct access to them, but there would be times when and the council was the same, the city was the same, they would get briefings on sort of what some of the issues were. Frankly, on the bridge, a lot of them were technical challenges of, you know, these are the constraints with the site. It's on a greenfield site. We talked about the challenge of trying to keep the bridge open as long as possible. The first option, which was east, which was close to the residents, people saw that as unacceptable, so they went back and looked at other options, and we've talked about not only, I mean, it was the public reaction, but people were raising good points. So we were like, okay, and, you know, talking through what those options were. So your representatives at times had access to some of that, probably not as much as in terms of the community involvement that I would have liked. And I did advocate for that. I don't always get my way. But I know they were doing a lot of work just on the technicalities of the project because it is so challenging. And there are lots of infrastructure projects, and the budget was part of the issue because this is what's happening with infrastructure projects across the country. And the federal government just pulled back a number of projects, as people are aware. So we needed this project to be done. You'd be aware that the second rail bridge has been taken off. That's one of the reasons, just to try and constrain the project, and so we need to keep within some sort of budget. So they had all these sort of and they were looking for a technical solution that they could tick off a number of things and keep the current bridge open. Because Brad's right, they were saying we really need to keep this bridge open as long as possible. But the only way to do that was to build one side or the other, and both sides had issues. So in the end, they researched quite heavily, this is what they told us anyway, researched quite heavily this design methodology. But to answer your question, I would like more consultation on different projects, and sometimes we've got an opportunity to do that. You know, other times it's me listening to people and then going and advocating.
Can I say that? It is a really good point, and it would be one that would save state government money. So people might not know, but $57 million has been spent on this project so far without any works. 57 million. That used to buy your bridge. Because, frankly, main roads weren't listening up front. And if main roads had listened earlier and actually engaged with the community earlier, instead of actually designing 3 or 4 different bridges after pushback, they wouldn't have blown that amount of money on different designs. And I think we should be outraged about that fact that we've had to go down that route of an absurdly long, painful community process, blowing probably more than 60 million now, that was as of the 30th of June, when actually if they'd engaged earlier, spoken with the community, had a proper engagement process, I reckon it would have saved the money, made it quicker. Actually, you're right, we've got a bit better design, and I'm hoping that the lessons learned at this new bit, as I said before, transparent and engagement from now on would be greatly appreciated.
So that brings us to the end of the night. So if you wouldn't mind picking up your ballot papers and putting number 1 in the boxes for the Honourable Simone McGurk, the Honourable Brad Pettitt, and the inestimable Martin Jones. First of all, I'd ask you to put hands together for Christian and Rob Jones.
You're all very visibly tired. I won't keep you any longer other than to say thank you, happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.